Well, welcome everybody to our top 25 reveal after party. We hope you make this a part of every Sunday because we're going to make it part of our Sunday. As you know, Brandon Meisner, Kris Ferguson, Chuck Bittner, and Matt Witwicky. We did the heavy lifting on the preview, something that had never been done before, and we were proud to have done it. And really want to thank you, gentlemen. For helping so much with that. Before we get started as Whit tweeted out, before we get started in airing of grievances, I want to explain to you what the idea about this was. Back in the day when before D2Football.com existed, I was part of a group of people who just chatted on the internet about Division II. And long story short, we used to chat every Sunday night, every Saturday night, just like we would, just like we would in here, or you can in here, or like they do on a Facebook or whatever. And we talked about D2 football, and we've continued that tradition on the website. The only problem and the only thing I didn't like about it, it has really became the same group of people that were doing it over and over again. And long story short, there became so many inside jokes that it really, people didn't want to stay long. It became like, like some people were outsiders to it and didn't understand things. And I wanted to remove those barriers. And I thought one way to do it would be for, a group of us to actually be on video so you could hear what we say and hear what we discuss. You can comment if you're watching, no matter on Facebook or on YouTube. You can comment just like you would on either of those, and we will respond to the comments as we go. One other thing, we will stream on Facebook and YouTube. It would be very helpful, and I never remember this because I'm not what I would consider a YouTuber, but if you would hit like and subscribe, we need some more subscribers to open up some options to us. I think we need 1,000 or something like that. If we get 1,000, it opens up options. But anyway, that was the idea behind this. We hope you join us every Sunday night, and we'll talk Division II football about anything anybody wants to talk about. But in the meantime, the top 25 poll has been released, and no surprise there. West Florida, last year's national champions, number 1, Minnesota State, Ferris State, Northwest Missouri State, Texas A&M Commerce. 1 through 5, Valdosta State, Lenore Ryan, Colorado Mines, Slippery Rock, Notre Dame, round out the top 10. Central Missouri, CSU Pueblo, Ouachita Baptist, Harding, Indianapolis, Kutztown, Bowie State, Carson Newman, Shepherd, IUP, Wingate, Tiffin, Lindenwood, Grand Valley, and Angelo State. So that's 1 through 25. Matt, since you made the funny joke about airing of grievances, let's start with you. What's one problem you have with the poll, or one compliment?
Yeah, immediate reaction I have is, of course, I'm the Northern Sun columnist, but I was frankly very surprised to see only one team from the Northern Sun making the top 25. Obviously, Minnesota State Mankato was going to be a given, but I thought, given the last few years, and whether it's Augustana, who brings back a whole lot of guys, or maybe potentially the University of Sioux Falls, a team who's been in the playoffs, a handful of times in the last few years. I thought one of those two would be in there. So I was pretty surprised not seeing them. The other thing was 4 teams out, the PSACs having 4 teams in there, and at the same time the Northern Sun having 1. That's probably something I was looking at right away. Yeah.
Okay. Either of you guys have any problems with anything?
Yeah, I think this poll is for everything that's happened. There are so many changes in rosters. I mean, it's a pretty good stab at what we got. So, I always look at 20 through 25 is always really tough to throw some teams in there. I think there's some teams that certainly were deserving. Whit mentioned one, which was Sioux Falls. I thought a random team that maybe not a lot of viewers think about, Truman State, was one that squeaked in towards the very end of the season and seemed to have a pretty good spring, but it's kind of left out. And I think, the PSAC, again, 4 teams, that's a lot. That seems like an awful lot.
When I do this poll each year, I always find that even just on a weekly basis, 10 to 20 is usually the hardest for me when I make this up. Top 10 is actually usually pretty easy because you have a really good feel for who those teams are. It's just what order you want to put them in. But I generally feel like I've got a pretty good idea of who I think those top 10 teams are. And then 20 to 25 is usually fairly easy too. And I typically try to look for teams that are really kind of on the upswing or, have done something pretty remarkable in recent weeks to kind of get them bumped into the poll. But the middle part, 10 to 20, is really hard, and actually is where a lot of those PSAC teams that you guys are complaining about show up. But hey, we're talking about playoff teams. A lot of these teams were in the playoffs. Typically, your preseason poll is a reflection of what happened the year before, and that's usually just how it is. I know we all try to put a lot of thought into it, but I would agree with Wed. I even just as a voter, I kind of just expect. I don't necessarily think about what conferences are represented when I do the poll, but after I looked at it when it was finalized, seeing only one team from the NSIC certainly surprises me too. And I think about Duluth and Augustana and Sioux Falls, are really teams that probably deserve to be there. So certainly will be fun to watch the next couple of weeks to see who bumps their way in, because I think there'll be a lot of movement in the bottom half of the poll in the first couple of weeks.
Well, I think the polls are also, and I've told you guys this story many times, but the polls are a remnant of old thinking. And as Kris mentioned, a lot of it is about who made the playoffs last year. And when each region gets the same amount of playoff teams every year, people kind of default to that, and that's probably why the PSAC is overrepresented. And I clearly believe it is overrepresented when there's only one NSIC team in there, 2 Gulf South, 2 MIAA, 2 GLIAC, 2 Lone Star. You're talking about those 4, being the best 4 conferences in Division II, and they only each have 2, while the PSAC has 1. However, having said that, it's not a checklist of conferences as we discussed, but if you had to pick a PSAC team, and Chuck, let's pick on you with this one. If you had to pick a PSAC team that is overrated, which would it be?
Realistically, I would go Kutztown. And the Kutztown program is very, very solid. The coaching staff there is excellent, and the team that they had in 2019 was really good. The reason I would say that would probably be the first suspect to pluck out of there, or the first team that might fall out just potentially by losing. And it just has to do with the roster turnover. I mean, they lost a bulk of the team that they had in 2019. We just don't know much about them. We talked about this in the Top 25 preview video as well. It's a little abnormal for the defending division champ to come into the preseason ranked 3rd in their own division. And I think it really is just because the coaches don't really even know what to expect out of Kutztown. So that's possibly a team to watch that might take a fall, but we have to see where that ends up. Shepherd as a PSEC team at 19th, actually I think is ranked too low. I think they've got an outstanding roster, and they'll probably move up as the season goes. Slippery Rock is probably right where they belong at 9 based on what they did in 2019. And honestly, if not for the fact that they don't have a starting quarterback coming back, it's one of the best looking 2 deeps of any of the teams that I looked at in the preseason. So I think that's probably about right for them. So if you'd put me on the spot and said, you got to take a team out of there, it would be Kutztown.
All right, Matt, jump on that. You disagreed with Slippery Rock.
I don't have Slippery Rock that high. I take a look at when you see a Slippery Rock get just waffle stomped by Mankato in the semis, and I see results like that. The quarterback's gone. I thought he had a huge piece of their success. Made a lot of plays. I thought that they were high at 9, and I would not have had them that high ahead of teams, whether it's the Pueblos of the world and stuff like that, who I think flat out beat them by a few scores. And I think there's plenty of others who might beat them by a few scores in that top 15. That's just my view. Yeah. I want
to respond to 2 comments I saw to John and Brad. And the reason I want to respond to both of them is because they're both relate. John mentioned Fort Hays. Bradley mentioned Augie. Those were the first two out of the poll, and they actually tied. So if there were a poll, if we did a top 27, they would have tied for 26. So those were the next two out of the poll. And theoretically, again, if you were looking at it differently, maybe Kutztown would have been out of there, and one of those teams would have been in. But they were tied. So that would address some of the questions and some of the comments.
I would agree on Fort Hays. I actually had them 17th in my top 25.
Okay.
I had them in. I had them at 17, so I definitely think that they belong in there. I had Grand Valley State a few spots higher, and actually I had them at 19. And actually, I think that's a little bit of a disservice. I think realistically, they'll be on the move. I think they'll probably be up there in the top 10 probably within a couple of weeks. But I had Fort Hays in there at 17. I think that they're I know the depth of the MIAA. The teams there are really, really solid, and I think that they're probably going to have an appearance in the top 25 pretty soon.
Well, the MIAA is also hurt by the scheduling that they do. Fort Hays and Northwest Missouri are opening up in the first game of the year, and so theoretically, I think we all believe that Fort Hays is a top 25 team. And we all believe that Northwest Missouri is probably a top 5 or top 10 team. Though the fact that they are facing off, and let's say Fort Hays does lose, that would knock them likely out of the top 25, in spite of the fact that we all believe they're a top 25 team. And if we were to project out to the end of the season, you would still pick Northwest to beat them. But it keeps certain teams from being ranked because they're not playing any non-conference games, and instead of Fort Hays playing a game that it might be, I guess it would be evenly matched with Northwest, but in a game where they could, get a win or get some momentum. It's part of the bad MIAA scheduling. It would be the same thing in the NSIC or the GAC. If Harding and Ouachita were to play each other in the first game of the year, you're going to have a good team that's going to be 0-1 because it faced the other good team in its conference, and it wouldn't have had the scheduling been the way it should be. Mankato and Duluth could play a game theoretically in the first game of the season, and the same thing could happen there. So anyway, that's my soapbox about scheduling. Yeah.
No, I was just going to mention real quick about the GAC because you kind of mentioned Ouachita and Harding, and they're one right behind the other. And Ouachita has a lot of question marks on offense. So, it's almost like they're, in my opinion, they might be a little overrated. I mean, you don't really know what you got early on. And we're kind of resting on, history here more than anything. So I think they're a little vulnerable where they are in the polls here.
Jerry, I'll put up the I'm sorry, Tim, I'll put up the top 25 again. Men, let's go ahead and what teams do you think are underrated? What teams do you think could outperform their ranking? I'm going to put up the top 25 again so that we can reference that because somebody had asked for it as well. But looking at that, who do you guys think might be underrated? I think Chuck already had mentioned Shepherd. He thought they might be underrated. And we mentioned Grand Valley. Any of the others? Anybody else underranked?
Yeah, I've got this is Witt talking, and I've got I have Northwest Missouri State, frankly, as good or better than any team in the country right now. I just really believe it. I thought it when I saw them in the spring, and I think that they're a really strong squad. Not that 4 versus 1's a whole lot different. If I take a look, the other one that kind of jumps out to me really is Lindenwood. I think you take a look at Lindenwood. They return, the player of the year in their conference on both offense and defense, along with a lot of other bodies. A squad who had beat Indianapolis, who was ranked 8 spots ahead of them. And I take a look at Lindenwood having won a playoff game on the road. I think Jed Stugert's kind of standing there, looking at, everybody's kind of treating him like, the guy who runs the Ferris wheel at the county fair. He should be getting a little bit more respect than this, I think, in my opinion. So those are the two that kind of jump off the page to me right away.
Right. Anybody else?
What it's interesting that you pick the team that's number 4 currently, and say you think they're a little underrated, because I was thinking along the same lines. I look at Valdosta State at 6. I had Valdosta State at number 5 in my preseason poll, and when I really kind of looked at them a little bit further after the GSC preseason poll and the players to watch and preseason all-conference team came out, I thought, wow, I might have really underestimated them, because they have a lot of dudes. There's actually still players on that team that won the national championship in 2018. They're really, really stacked at running back and wide receiver. Rogan Wells isn't there anymore. I think we kind of documented his travels in the last couple months. He went from Valdosta to Tusculum, won a championship at Tusculum, which was awesome, and now he's at Western Carolina. So he got to make the jump to Division I that he probably was looking for and definitely deserved. But he's not there anymore, but they've still got Ivory Durham. And we saw him in 2018 and 2019. Very, very talented football player. So he's going to be the quarterback now at Valdosta. So that's just a loaded offense. And they got a lot of bodies on defense too. So I think that could be a team that quickly goes from a number 5 to number 6 to, if you look at any of those teams ahead of them that would lose, that's a team that's potentially a number 1 by the end of the season. So I definitely look at them. Talked about Shepherd. I agree with you on Lindenwood. That's just become a really solid program. Agree with them as well. There's probably some others I could make that argument with too, but it is interesting. Even you look in the top 5 and you think there's some programs that might be might be a little underrated.
I guess
we had a question. Oh, go ahead, Kris.
I was gonna say mine for underrated, probably Harding. When you look at the amount of returning starters, and they're a team that, again, not a lot of schools think about, but man, they have great ball control. They got a lot of returning folks on offense, and that's a very dangerous team. Even when you get to the playoff, even if they're in a lower seed, they are very dangerous. And I think even in the mid-teens, I think that they're an underrated team beyond the top 10.
All right, so we had a question, and it was from Chad. Any teams outside the top 25 that you expect to jump up and surprise people? Have we addressed that a little bit, maybe with Fort Hays and Augustana? Any others that we could think of?
So I'll give you a name of a team that I voted for I used them as my number 25, which I typically use that for somebody that hasn't been in the poll in the previous weeks. UT Permian Basin in the LSC. Okay. They played in the spring, had a phenomenal spring, played really well, won I think 5 or 6 games, including a couple against LSC teams, and they had a really good finish in 2019 as well. A lot of talent down there. They've recruited well. Saw some really explosive players in the games I watched in the spring. Don't know what their ceiling is for this year, but that's a team that's really hot. The program's really hot right now. So could be a team that jumps up into the top 25 maybe in a couple weeks. Might surprise some people. So that was a team that I put a little confidence behind, just to really kind of recognize what they'd done at the end of 2019 and in the spring.
All right, man. So looks like we lost Kris. We'll see if he comes back in a minute. We did that. We looked at that. You guys want to go ahead and start looking at some of the games this week?
Brandon, let me ask, do you mind if I give – I had some that I had kind of scratched down as maybe teams that I wouldn't have had ranked quite so high.
No, go ahead. It's all good.
Now, Northern Sun people will be surprised that I personally didn't have Mankato as high as 2. And it's not because I don't think they're the best team in the Northern Sun. I do. But I think just because of how many bodies they're having to replace, they may not look like Mankato until midseason because the fact that they are only bringing back 3 and 4 starters on either side of the ball and a lot of production to replace. That's not to say they can't, but they just have a ton of production to replace. They played Duluth week 2. I think we're going to find out about them pretty quickly. They're going to have to be ready right away. But I had them. I frankly, I wouldn't have had Grand Valley ranked. Just because the fact I take a look at the fact that what is it, 2 of the last 3 seasons they haven't made the playoffs. I think sometimes, whether it's Grand Valley, whether it's Duluth, sometimes we look at the past championships or success and, give them a little bit of a pass when it comes to the rankings. So I personally didn't have them in my top 25 poll, and I'm sure I'll have people throwing my rocks my way for that, but that's okay. But I take a look at, Fort Hays, like you mentioned, I would have had them ranked, but those are kind of some of the ones that come to mind for me. Chuck, how about yourself?
Yeah, I went through a couple of ones that I had mentioned. I'm actually going to pivot, if you don't mind, with there's a couple of questions, a couple of things that came up in the comments. I'm going to mention. Tim had talked about how far apart are Carson Newman and Lenore Ryan. So here's a really great thing about the South Atlantic Conference, and there's some other conferences that have this benefit too. Most of the footprint for the SAC is really close together. You can get from almost any 2 schools in about a 2 to 2.5 hour drive max. In fact, I even charted this back when Florida Tech dropped their program late last year during the early parts of COVID. I was looking at the distances for Florida Tech to get to the other GSC teams, and their closest road trip was further than the longest road trip between any 2 SAC schools. So the SAC schools are all really close together, and actually starting next year, they're going to go to a divisional format where they're going to kind of do most likely East-West. It could be North-South, but it's probably going to be an East-West format. So then it gets even easier, and they're going to be really close together. So some other conferences that have that benefit as well, but it's definitely a good one in the SAC. Jerry, your comment about East Central. Yeah, I was tracking that in the spring season. East Central played Tarleton, and I don't remember if they actually officially counted that. It was a little hazy. It was marked as a scrimmage for a while, and then it was changed to a game. Then it was changed back to a scrimmage. Whatever it was, East Central beat them, which is a really good result for them. So that could be a team to watch as well. Armo, your question about Newberry? Yeah, same thing with them and UT Permian Basin. Newberry had 3 straight losing seasons after winning the SAC in 2016. So getting some momentum was really a big deal for them. And beyond that, they played really well. They've had a lot of instability at quarterback. They've been shuffling guys in and out for the last couple of years. They really found their guy now. Dre Harris is going to be a senior. He took almost all the meaningful snaps in that spring season. Played really, really well. They ran the ball very effectively as well. And Newberry usually has a good defense. So I didn't pull the trigger and put Newberry up in the top 2 or 3 in my SAC preview, but realistically, I think they might be a team that actually can challenge to win the SAC this year if everything comes together for them. So,
hey, check the comments. Tim actually is readdressing the question. He was talking about talent, not geography, which I thought it was geography as well. But he was saying how close is Newberry to Lenore Ryan?
Chuck, can we bring your cat back in the video again?
I'd love to punt that. She's sleeping over here. She's sleeping over here.
If anybody wants to send catnip to me, I'll make sure it gets to Chuck.
Well, hopefully the monologue about geography in the SAC still was beneficial to everyone. How far apart are they talent-wise? I don't really have a good read on Carson Newman right now, and here's the reason why. Most of you probably know the transfer portal was really busy from late 2019 through. I mean, it still is very busy. Just so much movement, and there are a lot of transfers that ended up in FCS and Division II schools that thought they might land somewhere in FBS school. Carson Newman actually has a lot of transfers on the roster this year. So their talent level might be extremely high. It could be the highest in the SAC. It could be the highest it's been at Carson Newman for a long time. I just don't really know yet. They typically have a lot of really good football players, especially on offense and the defensive backfield. They're very, very talented. Line play, offensive line is a big question mark for them this year. So there's a lot of unknowns at Carson Newman. There's just a lot more that I know about Lenore Ryan. So, how far apart are they? Probably not very far apart at all. And in fact, from a talent standpoint, it wouldn't be shocking if Carson Newman actually ends up being the more talented team. Whether that means that they win on the field, I don't know. But just looking at the talent that was already there and the transfers they brought in, they have a really good looking roster.
All right, Brad, addressing the COVID thing. From what I understand, each conference has its own protocol and its own set of rules for vaccination numbers and how to handle testing, et cetera, et cetera. And I believe most people are defaulting to whatever the local rules are. Now, this is entirely 100% speculation by me. I believe that some game is going to get forfeited because of COVID this year, or canceled. I believe that one is going to happen. And if that does happen, I believe, and I have not talked to anybody from the NCAA, not a conference commissioner, not an athletic director or coach about this, but my gut is that they will treat it as they used to treat freak weather cancellations. Because really what people are concerned about is the minimum number of D2 games needed to make the playoffs. So if you were at 8 and then you get a COVID forfeit or a COVID cancellation and now you're at 7 or whatever the numbers are, I don't remember. It's been 2 years since I've had to worry about that. But nonetheless, I believe that they will treat it that way, that they will treat it as an outlying situation. You may get dinged for it in terms of seed, maybe, but I think it would be unwise to do anything other than be cool about it this year, if that makes sense. I don't think Team A should be penalized because Team B happened to have too many COVID cases and they had to cancel a contest.
Brandon, in speaking with coaches in the Northern Sun this last week, I had a few of them asking me that very same question, if we had heard anything further, because they had not gotten clarification yet on this very topic. They were asking, of course, what's the minimum games needed? What is it going to be, 8? Right. Whatever it would be, because you have the FCS, was it the Missouri Valley, that is going to be calling these forfeits as opposed to calling them, basically a no contest. So. Right. It's kind of going to be up in the air, and I would imagine just about every conference has got to be immediately concerned with that. But as you mentioned, a lot of this is a state thing. I can tell you up here where I'm out in South Dakota, I mean, it's like COVID. What? I mean, nobody's really too concerned about it. Whereas next door in Minnesota, where a lot of my conference is located, the schools, they're not looked at the same way at all. They're a lot more stringent. So it could really be different from state to state within the same conference.
Right. Taking the politics out of it all. Yep. One school should not be penalized by the COVID at another school. It just doesn't make sense. And hopefully the NCAA would react in that manner. And just that just makes sense. So
I think we're all hoping that this wasn't even going to be an issue or be a factor, but we haven't even kicked off yet, and it already is.
Right.
There's already been a couple of games that got moved from Thursday night to Saturday because of some roster limitations with some COVID protocols.
Right.
Edinburgh Valley was one of them.
Matt had commented about that. I've been so involved with the video in the top 25 release that I didn't know that. So I'm glad he said something.
There was at least one other one that I can't remember which game it is that moved from Thursday to Saturday because of that. And I think it was just today that it was announced that the Edinburgh at Grand Valley is going to move from a Thursday night to Saturday. Mm-hmm. And that's an example if you have a team in Pennsylvania and a team in Michigan.
Right.
So you might have some different state regs, some different local regs. So it'll be interesting.
Very good. Well, let's change the subject just a little bit. Because we were mentioning Edinburgh, Grand Valley. A long time ago, when we first started working on this preview and what we might want to do for it, I had written down some games that I thought were very interesting in week 1. And do you guys have any off the top of your head that are particularly interesting? in the first week?
Commerce and Pueblo will be my interesting one. I mean, you got two top 25 schools going at it, right out the gate. And, there are certainly some question marks for both schools, too. I mean, Commerce has got to figure out its quarterback situation because their starter's out for, we have no idea how long he's going to be out, and Pueblo, how are they going to also function on offense, even though they do have a really skilled running back transfer come in.
Right.
But even then, that's a really interesting one. There's a lot of twists and turns and should be a really good test out the gate for both teams.
Yeah, I think that's a marquee game myself. No question about it. I mean, those are two teams ranked in the top 15 right off the bat. And, it's a part of kudos to those guys. They're playing a really ambitious schedule. They really are.
Agreed.
I love these early season out of conference games. We don't really get enough of them in Division II. Some of the conferences have really gone towards, scheduling just within the conference, or maybe you get one open week for out of conference. But these out of conference games are really good. The schedule this week is I'm really excited about. Even just looking at Thursday, where there's like almost 35 games, I think.
Yeah.
The schedule is stacked. There's some really, really good ones. West Georgia, Carson Newman is one I'm watching. Obviously, that's a SAC game, so I'm really interested in that. But it's an in-region game. We talked about West Georgia, possibly, looking for a bounce-back year. Shepherd at Ohio Dominican. That's going to be a good one. Later on in the evening, you got Pittsburgh State and Central Missouri. Northwestern Fort Hays. So we talked about Fort Hays, possibly, being dissed a little bit, not being ranked. They got a chance to prove it right off the bat, don't they? So that's going to be a really exciting one to watch for. Really excited about that one.
I just want to throw one out there that's a region game, and that's Lenore-Rhyne, because they travel to Virginia State, which is a very under the radar, hard nosed team. And what I really like about this game as a CIAA guy is that the SAC schools are not afraid to travel, and they're actually going to Virginia State to play this game. So, Virginia State loves to run the ball, and they've been in the playoffs before in the last few years. Lenore-Rhyne has been a playoff team. We know a lot about them, highly ranked. So, I think that's going to be certainly a welcome test for them as a Super Region 2 game, week 1.
Right,
yeah, Kris, I think that's just a great game for both of those programs, especially, for Lenore-Rhyne, a team that's got expectations of being in the regional rankings late in the year. If you have a win on the road against a Virginia State team that's probably going to be, a 6, 7, 8, 9 win team, maybe conference champion, who knows? That's a really valuable win if they can get it. Now, obviously, there's the risk of losing, but hey, we play the games to try to win, right? So that's a great game. I'm excited about that one. I know you are too. I think I was there the last time those two teams played, and it was not a good day for Lenore-Rhyne. Virginia State got all over them. That was a little bit of a different LR team a few years ago, but they have some history. That game's gone both ways a couple times. So yeah, I'm excited for that one too.
Isn't Angelo State heading on up to Lindenwood? Is that a week 1 game as well? And that'll be Thursday. Yep, there you go. 2 ranked teams, and Angelo. What do we have them? Our second? Yeah. 25. So yeah, they're the second team ranked out of that conference, and so yeah, absolutely. I'll be heading on over here in town in Sioux Falls, where I'm at. The University of Sioux Falls hosts Bemidji State. And Bemidji State will be without their star running back, Jalen Fry, who got a leg injury earlier in the summer and will be missing the season. And I think the University of Sioux Falls and Bemidji are two of the more physical teams in the Northern Sun. So I'm looking forward to seeing that one close up.
Yeah, Saturday afternoon, Ashland and Notre Dame. That's a big one.
Yes, it is.
I think, Brandon, you talked about Ashland possibly being a team that could have been ranked, and Notre Dame's a top 10. So huge early season test for both of them.
I also had East Central at Harding was fairly interesting to me, since East Central had beaten who did they beat, Tarleton, or was it another one?
Right.
It was Tarleton. Okay, it was Tarleton. So East Central had beaten Tarleton in the spring. They're playing Harding, and then I thought Savannah State of Valdosta State was very interesting. SIAC versus GSC. Probably Savannah State, in my opinion, will probably end up becoming the best program in the SIAC. We'll see. I just have that gut feeling about the way that they're going to do things, and I see the way they operate in some culture things. It really gives me positive feelings about them. That I think that they're going to.
I could see that, Brandon.
Program. Yeah,
I could definitely see that, Brandon. Here's an under the radar one, and this game's not going to move the needle anywhere in the national or regional rankings. But Allen and Benedict. SIAC, since you're talking about that, Brandon, those two schools are literally across the street from each other in Columbia, South Carolina. You literally could walk from one campus right into the next one and not even know it. And this is the first year for Allen in Division II and in the SIAC. So that should be a really fun new rivalry in Division II in the SIAC, and they're playing on Saturday.
I want to speak to that. Back in the day, 2011, maybe 2014, it was somewhere back in the day. Bob Evelyn and I went to Henderson State and Ouachita Baptist, which are across the street from each other. And, I live in the middle of the MIAA, and Pitt State and Northwest Missouri State have a great rivalry, play at Arrowhead. And the folks down in the GAC, or I guess it wasn't the GAC, maybe it was, whatever. We're talking about
the GSC back in those days, I think.
I can't remember exactly what it was, but nonetheless, they talked about how it was the best rivalry, and it was, in Division II and all this stuff. And I kind of rolled my eyes, and I went down there, and it was great. It was absolutely fabulous. I know this is a negative, but I took it as a positive, that the schools have to put trash bags and plastic over monuments and statues, or otherwise the other schools will desecrate them with the colors and stuff. And I know that that's vandalism and illegal, but I thought this is awesome. These guys really care, and you've seen it where they can actually walk from one stadium to the other, and they do. There's no bus trip that week.
You can go into each stadium. You can go into the stadium, go up in the seats, and you can look across the street and you can see the other stadium. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, and so anyway, that made me think of that. That was a fun weekend, and one of the best memories I've had traveling the country. I want to go back to September 2nd, which would be Thursday. Did we mention Slippery Rock and Wayne State? Did we mention that one?
I don't think we talked about that one.
I think that's a very interesting game. Not from the standpoint that Wayne State is a national power, and certainly they're not ranked the way Slippery Rock is. But they had a good season in 2019. I think, that's definitely something to watch. West Georgia at Carson Newman. Did we mention that one? Because I find that one interesting.
I mentioned it, but I breezed over it. But yeah, that's a big early season test for Carson Newman, and a great opportunity for West Georgia, because they're coming in, after a not so great 2019. I think they were 6-5 in 2019, West Georgia. They certainly have been setting their expectations a lot higher than that. They expect to be at the top of the GSC, and fighting for the playoffs. So they have a lot to prove. Great opportunity for them early in the season. And
on Friday, Westchester's at Bentley, and I know neither one of those teams are ranked, but Bentley has typically been, one of, if not the best programs in the Northeast 10, and Westchester's been a playoff contender and actually very successful in the playoffs. So that game was sort of interesting to me as well.
Friday Night Lights in the Northeast 10, they play a lot of Friday night football. The Mountain East Conference plays a lot of Thursday night football when we get into the season. The Northeast 10 plays a lot of Friday night football. Good tip for anybody that's watching. If you're looking for D2 football, the Northeast 10 on Friday nights is usually a place to look. Those two teams have a lot of history. They've played each other a handful of times, and I think Bentley was one of the preseason favorites in Northeast 10, and Paul, our friend Paul, just dropped his Northeast 10 preview today, and he's definitely looking at them as one of the favorites to win the Northeast 10. So, real important game for both those teams.
He might be the godfather of all the columnists by now. He's been doing that. He's been doing that forever. He is as constant as a Northern Star. I love that dude. So, and then hey, on Sunday, Fort Valley and Tuskegee are playing. Is that game still scheduled? Yeah, is that game still on? Is weather affecting that game at all?
It shouldn't.
I don't think it will.
I didn't know, Kris. If nobody knows, Kris is climate
refugee.
Yeah, that's right. So
yeah,
he had to. Would you go from Louisiana to Dallas? Is that where you went?
Yeah, yesterday. But
Okay.
Ida should be past. It may affect maybe a game or two up north on Thursday. Post tropical, but by Sunday that storm will be long gone.
Okay.
So it shouldn't be an issue for Fort Valley and Tuskegee, and that will be an interesting game too. Fort Valley did play some in the spring. They were probably the only HBCU I think to play in the spring, and they also got a pretty talented transfer from John C. Smith and Emmanuel Wilson, who the guy really top five, and I think he was top five at one point in all-purpose yards or rushing yards, one of the two stats in Division II. So it's a pretty big addition to already pretty competitive offense for Fort Valley. So that's probably going to be my favorite in that game.
Okay. I two things I wanted to make sure to cover. Sent out questionnaires before, 2 or 3 months ago, about what everybody had coming back. And it made me think, I got to thinking, this is such a weird year. We've never dealt with this before because of COVID, but everybody's getting an extra year. So I was curious who would be the oldest player in Division II. And, I thought it would be somebody 26 or 27 years old, something like that. Well, it turns out the oldest player in Division II, at least that we can find out, is Dean Faithful. He's a kicker at CSU Pueblo, and he was born in May of 1987. And so he's into his 30s. That's the oldest player in Division II this year. He's from Hampshire, England. And then one other thing I found, there are 3 brothers on the same team at Lock Haven, the Barber family, Anthony, Austin, and Samuel. That's just random things that, they're not worthy of a column, but it is interesting to talk about. And man, 34 years old on a football team, that's pretty crazy. So, but anyway, I think we've covered everything in the poll. Any final comments on the poll? Do we need to do that, or are we good? Okay, very good, guys. Anything else for this week, or do you think?
So one more scheduling note that I'll throw out there before we head off, and it's getting late on the East Coast here, but our number 1 ranked team, West Florida, is at Division I McNeese State on Saturday. First of all, who at McNeese State signed off on that? They don't want any part of West Florida. That's pretty insane to take that on. There's nothing for them to gain by signing up for that game. What do you guys think? Can West Florida win that?
I think they do win that. I think they're ready to go when they bring back the quarterback and the system, and I think they're going to be ready to. They haven't played a football game in a pretty good amount of time, and I think that they'll step up to that. Sure.
I agree, absolutely, and I think Ida might play some cover there to get that game off the books for McNeese. So I wouldn't be surprised to see if they pull that out. But I think West Florida is going to be highly competitive, and I think they can win that game. Absolutely.
I'm with you. I'm not going to go quite as all in as Whit. I like you being definitive, Whit. You're
all in Whit,
going after it. I'm not quite as confident, but I definitely think that they've got a shot in that game.
We got to find out what the number is on that, Chuck. But anyway.
All right. Hey, Mint, thank you very much. To anybody watching, thank you for tuning in. We're going to do this every Sunday. Now, it typically won't be this late unless we talk for 2 hours. We'll start at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll do this very same thing, just casually talking about what has happened, what might happen. We might, talk about the Sunday night football game, whatever floats our boat that weekend or that night. We're going to do this, and please come in and join us. I would appreciate if you guys would spread the word. I think this is a joyous. I love Division II football. I'm extremely happy to have the season in front of us, to have football returned. It's wonderful. And again, on Facebook, if you could like d2football.com. We don't update it that much because we use other things to update more, and especially the site itself, and we tweet more than we update the Facebook page. But we will do things like this on the Facebook page. So if you like it and follow it, you'll get the notifications. And if you could like and subscribe on YouTube, it does help us out. We'd like to get to 1,000 subscribers because it does give us some options. But in any case, thanks everybody, and I think we will go ahead and sign off for the night. And thank God football is here, man.
We're back. Enjoy the games this week.